Now, Minsk, the venue, and at half-time it had certainly been a disappointing night for the Dutch. They'd had to try and piece themselves together. So let's take a look at this match then between Belarus and Holland, played in the European Championship qualifier. Well, the story here is that Holland, in the white with the yellow shorts, came after a defeat against the Czech Republic into this match in Minsk in front of 12,000, with 7 of the starting lineup of the Ajax side that won the European Cup against AC Milan in Vienna a fortnight previous. Belarus's record is desperate: 11 matches, just 1 win, and that against Luxembourg. Belarus, the 11-1 outsiders for this match, and Holland made a good start, and De Boer could so easily have given them the lead. But it was an extraordinary night of real drama here, and a result that still could prove very costly indeed to Holland, although they were subsequently let off by the sensational score of Luxembourg 1, the Czech Republic 0, which means that this group is fascinatingly poised, Group 5, with still Norway, the Czech Republic and Holland able to qualify. Well, only 1 goal came in the match, and it came after 25 minutes, but it was a game that the Dutch will look back on that they shouldn't really have let in their inexperienced opponents. They gave a debut to Edwin van der Sar, the Ajax goalkeeper, and he was to have nightmares really about the goal that proved costly. Here was the chance down the other end. Ronald de Boer had scored 6 times for Holland, and this is his 17th appearance, and he came crashing in and really very unlucky not to have given the Dutch the lead. A real mixed bag then for their opponents. Belarus being led by Vladimir Škuroval, and one player with Dutch connections, number 6, Andrej Sigmatovic, who played for Santander. A lot of these players played their football in Israel, and it certainly showed that they were able to give the Dutch a battle. Whether or not the Ajax players were mentally and physically jaded after their European Cup excursions, it's hard to tell, but after a long, tiring season, I would think motivation was the major problem in helping these players after a long season. Well, the warning signs had been there for Edwin van der Sar long before the opening goal, when it eventually came after 25 minutes. But this was to be one of the saddest nights, really, from a professional footballing point of view for Holland I could remember, because they ought to have been able to overrun a team like Belarus with a side that they put out. But here, giving them chance after chance and not really creating that many opportunities for themselves. Who's hitting? The Dutch manager who took over from Dick Advocaat. Well, he'll have a few nightmares about this goal when it came. After 25 minutes, it was Piotr Kacioro who created it, and then away goes the eventual goal scorer, Sergei Gershevitz. Well, he rounded van der Sar, who'd committed himself far too early, and the angle may have been acute, but the finish and the celebrations told its own story. Utter delight for Belarus. One of the big shocks in European football history, this really, because Belarus unconsidered for this match. They've not played well in the other qualifying matches, but here, great play from an acute angle and a fine finish from Gershevitz. 1-0 to Belarus after 25 minutes. Well, their celebrations are continuing in Minsk, and it's easy to see why it was taken wide, and you couldn't really blame the covering defenders, and certainly Belarus deserved their lead at this stage. Well, they didn't have too many other chances, and in fact there's no doubt that my man of the match was Valery Shantoslav, and he's the Belarus keeper. Well, chance after chance came the way of Holland, but they were unable to really penetrate with good quality chances, and Shantoslav was in good form in goal. Danny Blind leading by example, the Dutch captain, and some inexperienced players in this side, although they have had experience at the high stage at club level, but internationally, why, very raw. In the end, Belarus overpowered and overran for much of the game, came out with an unlikely one-goal victory. They weren't able to add to it in the second half. They didn't need to. The onus was all on Holland, and they showed very little. This a very disappointing result for Holland, but they've been let off by the performance of Luxembourg and the last-minute goal of Guy Hellers. Final score in Minsk for a depleted and a disappointing Dutch side, who left the field at half-time and were unable to penetrate Belarus in the second half. Final score, Belarus 1, Holland 0. Well, we're able to bring you some of the action from the second half now, which again was a very disappointing affair for Holland. 1-0 down at half-time to the goal from Gershemits, and in the second half Holland tried to pick up the tempo, but it never really worked for them. Van der Sar replacing the Guidi Feyenoord keeper, who's got a broken finger, and Ajax predominantly playing a major role in this Dutch side with 7 of the starting lineup. Certainly Ruud Hiddink would have been disappointed with the contribution of many of the players. 7 for Ajax, Johnny Van Skip, his last international appearance 3 years ago against Norway. Wonder whether it will be his final appearance for Holland, because his contribution minimal. The Dutch press, they don't often slate their team. It's not the done thing in Holland, but I think there were 1 or 2 who were severely disappointed by their side performance. Now the flag was up here to deny Patrick Kluivert, the man who won the European Cup for Ajax with that late goal against Milan. And you couldn't really tell from this angle, but the decision was probably the correct one. Certainly it was a constant barrage of white shirts and orange shorts in the second half, as Holland looked to try and get at least an equaliser. But it was a night when Belarus had to thank a superb goalkeeping performance from Valery Shantoslov. The 29-year-old Shantoslov in tremendous form, getting up to deny everybody, and even when the defenders were there, like Stan Valks from PSV, he was still able to conjure up a great save. Well, there's the first one, pushed away for a corner, and the second one was the header. And certainly Holland, who, remember, had suffered 1 or 2 shocks in the early stages of their World Cup qualifying campaign, particularly don't forget the game against Saudi Arabia, where they were a goal behind and then came back and won it with a Taument header in the last minute, having equalised from Wim Jonk. But they are in big danger now of missing out in England, and that would be a commercial disaster for the side that's jointly hosting the European Championships that follow England with Belgium. A yellow card, the inevitable result here for this challenge. Stan Valks, the one who went up to the referee shaking his head, but he wasn't the guilty partner. And the man brought down, the goal scorer, Gershmitz. Oh, it was very late, that, and I don't think Johan de Kock can have had too many complaints about that. So Edwin van der Sar then finally getting his chance to play for his country, but the goal will haunt him as the one that got away. Holland will now look to the home game against Norway as a must-win and hope that Norway can do themselves and Holland a big favour by beating the Czechs on 2 occasions. Certainly, had Czechoslovakia managed to gain any form of a result in Luxembourg, the onus would be massively with them and hugely against the Dutch. But suddenly, despite the fact they've lost consecutive internationals to the Czech Republic and now to Belarus, they can still qualify for next year's finals, albeit through the back door. Their final match, the decisive one, will be against Norway. Probably in Rotterdam on the 15th of November, so it's shaping up to be an extraordinary qualifying run. Norway take on the Czech Republic next, home and away, so it's a big month for the Czechs with 2 games against Norway. Holland will desperately need revenge when their next match takes place against Biélorussie at home. They then travel to Malta. And here it was the Dutch who tried to finish the game off strongly, bringing on Aaron Winter for Danny Blind and Arthur Newman for Stan Vaux. They still couldn't penetrate a way through a stubborn Belarus defence. And so, as we moved into injury time, the photographers all went to the benches to photograph the elated and dejected managers, because this is a bad night for Dutch football as the final whistle goes. It's Belarus 1, Holland 0, and Holland will now need maximum points from their last 3 games against Belarus, against Malta, and the key game against Norway if they're to qualify at the last gap. The Czech Republic are still favourites, but they've got the tougher schedule to come. It's all going to be very close in Group 5.